Hello and welcome to Bhagavatam. We finished with Canto 1 and we're now on to the second canto. This is chapter 1. This part of the Bhagavatam deals with the crux of the matter. This is why this was spoken. This is where it all began. It began at a time when the person who was the emperor of the world, Parikshit, he was cursed to die within 7 days. And that brings up a really big question. What does a person do when they know that they're going to die? So all of us know this. I mean, it's nothing new. It's no news. It's no great information that I'm giving you, that we will all die. And, if I was telling you we had a trip being planned to, let's say, Italy, and we were all going to go together, you'd say, hey, great, wonderful, where are the tickets? Where are we going to stay? What are we going to do? You'd want to prepare for that trip. You want to block off your calendar. You want to set aside time so you can really be there. You can really be enjoying it, take a break from your work. You'd prepare for the trip. Now there is a trip that we are all going to take. Me, you, and all of us. And that is the trip called death. And while most people don't like to talk about it, and some would like to placate you by telling you we're all going to heaven, the reality is actually quite different. As has been shown by near-death experiences and through even past life regressions and various other modalities, we've got to learn that life doesn't end with death. Death is just another journey into another dimension, and then we're back again in another body, in another family, in another country, in another religion, in another situation, rich or poor, and we got to start all over again. Yeah, as kids, that's right. Little babies, that's right. I want you to really contemplate this. Buddhist monks will contemplate by going and sitting in a graveyard and watching the dead being brought in, or funeral pyres being lit, or graves being dug, and really meditating on this fact as a way to prepare themselves for the inevitable. What's the preparation you've been doing? Have you even thought about it? I know you might have thought about how you might progress your career, your business, your work, or the things you might like to own. But on this journey, on this trip, that happens within a few years and could be 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, I don't know. It's different for each of us. In fact, the day cannot be predicted. The time cannot be predicted. It could be a minute from now and it could be 50 years from now. But whenever it occurs, we've got to be ready, right? Because it is the only thing that is guaranteed in life. Death is the only thing that is guaranteed in life. Everything else is uncertain. Everything else may or may not happen. You may or may not get rich. You may or may not find your ideal mate. You may or may not be happy. You may or may not achieve your dreams or your goals or your visions. You do, it's wonderful. And if you don't, you know what? That's wonderful too. Because in the end, it doesn't matter. What does matter is this: how did you prepare for the ultimate journey of life? And that ultimate journey begins with that word that we want to avoid at all costs, that thought that we want to avoid under all circumstances because it frightens us. I say, deal with that fear, face that fear, step into that fear, and contemplate death. This is the subject matter of the Bhagavatam today, because the king Parikshit has been cursed to die, as I was telling you earlier, and he is like, okay, I'd rather know a fixed day, I'd rather know, time when this is going to happen and then prepare than not knowing. Sometimes it happens that people have been, told that they have cancer or they have some other disease and they've got a month to live or 6 months or a year, and they should settle their affairs, as they say. And I'd say settle our affairs now. Now, don't wait until that time. Prepare now. So what is it that it takes to prepare for death? that's what we're going to dive into today, and let's get started with that. So this is Canto 2, Chapter 1. So let's put that on the screen for you. Yeah. And yeah. So this is the situation that we are looking at. There is the king, and he's now on his knees, as you can see, sitting in front of the saint Parikshit. Parikshit literally was walking around like a crazy person. People could not understand him. He was wearing no clothes. He was not interested in the world. And children were running after him, mocking him. Oh my God, this crazy fellow walking around without any clothes on. Oh. But when he entered this assembly of great saintly people, sages and yogis and really wise gurus, they stood up and welcomed him and gave him the seat of honor because they recognized who he is. And the children all got quiet and they said, oh my God, maybe we made a big mistake here. Yes, and he is the son of Vyas. Vyas is the person who compiled all of the Vedas, and he had heard it, this Srimad Bhagavatam, from his father. So now the king approaches him and he asks him this really, really important question. The king asks him, you are the spiritual master, the guru of great saints and devotees. I am therefore begging you to show the way of perfection for all persons, and especially for one who is about to die. Please let me know what a person should hear, speak about, remember, and worship, and also what he should not do. At that moment, Shukhadev, the highly evolved being, said, my dear king, your question is glorious because it is very beneficial to all kinds of people. The answer to this question is the prime subject matter for hearing, and it is approved by all transcendentalists. Those persons who are materially engrossed, being blind to the knowledge of ultimate truth, have many subject matters for hearing in human society. Let's take a moment to contemplate that. We all have many things we'd like to hear, ranging from from our latest shows to our latest preoccupations with whatever it is that we are into. We all have lots of things that we are interested in. We're listening to podcasts, we're watching YouTube, we're in so many ways immersed in whatever it is that we are intrigued by. Now, what is it that we need to do to be able to actually be thinking about? Because we're here busy with all the matters of our life, thinking about what shows we're watching, how do we entertain ourselves, what is going on at work, what is going on in our relationship. In all these different ways, we are contemplating something. And our mind is definitely absorbed in that. But he's now telling us that we need to put our attention on something else. He's saying that people who are materially engrossed are blind to the knowledge of the ultimate truth and have many subjects for hearing in human society. The lifetime of such a person, that is a materially engrossed person, is passed at night either in sleeping or in sexual indulgence, and in the daytime either in making money or maintaining family members. So I think we can all relate to this because we're all in this boat together. I'm not saying I'm any different. We're all in the same situation. And what we need to learn is how to get out of it. Right? So how do we stop this? How do we get ourselves to start thinking of something beyond the worldly stuff? And it's something that we cultivate. It's not something that's going to happen automatically. It's not going to happen overnight. It's a taste that has to be cultivated, just as much as if you developed a taste in reading. Now, it's very easy to get off reading these days when you've got all these video channels and these TV things and the internet to keep us busy. And sometimes we can lose an interest in reading. It can happen very easily to us. But how do you get back into the reading habit? It's no shortcut. You just start reading. And as you get reading, you develop your habit all over again. How do you develop a habit for exercising? Same thing. How do you develop a habit for eating healthy? Same thing. You do it. And as you do it, your body becomes accustomed to that. Your mind becomes accustomed to that. And now you develop a taste for it. You develop an appreciation for it. If you go from very spicy food to very bland food, it might feel, nah, this is no good. But then gradually you develop a taste for it. Right? If you've been a meat eater and then you become a vegetarian or a vegan, it takes time, but you develop a taste. Similarly, we've been engaged in all kinds of mundane activities, and to develop a taste for hearing about, speaking about, remembering spiritual things takes a little time. But the more we practice, the faster our progress becomes, the faster it is that we develop that taste, that appreciation, and then it becomes something you can't live without. Then it becomes integrated into you. It becomes a part of who you are. Shukhadev, the great teacher, the great guru, continues speaking. He says, persons devoid of self-knowledge, Atma Tattva, that is the knowledge, the truth of this true self. Persons devoid of this knowledge do not inquire into the problems of life, being too attached to the fallible soldiers like the body and family. Although sufficiently experienced, they still do not see their inevitable destruction. So we live with blinkers on our eyes, focused on our desires, focused on our needs, focused on our expectations and our fears. Actually, if you look at it, all of our needs, our expectations come down to one thing, fear. But what the Bhagavad Gita teaches us, what the Bhagavatam teaches us, is that there is no reason for fear. We are deathless beings. We do not need to fear life. We do not need to fear death. We do not need to fear God, and we do not need to fear who we are. In fact, it's quite the opposite. It's a celebration. And the more we get in tune with who we are, the greater the celebration becomes. Because the more we're trying to squeeze pleasure and happiness out of the world, the more frustrated we're becoming. The more we're trying to make somebody the ultimate person in our life, the more we're trying to make something the source of our happiness, the more frustrated we're getting. Because nothing and no one ultimately can satisfy us. What they can give us is a temporary pleasure. And there's nothing wrong in that. All right, let's be clear. But don't make that everything. Don't make that the goal of your life. The goal of your life is not to live happily ever after, because nobody does. The goal of your life is to find that happiness which nothing and no one can take away from you. That is the goal of life. And that goal can only be achieved by going within you, by finding that part of you which is deathless, which does not perish with the body. That part of you has within it, its nature, its very fundamental essence, its building blocks are peace, are happiness. Sat, Chit, Ananda. Ananda means bliss. Chit means consciousness, and Sat means that it is eternal. It is the ultimate truth. That which you are is the source of bliss. You cannot find it outside any more than you can squeeze water out of a rock. You cannot. It just won't happen. But that which you seek is already here. And so he says here that Shukadev continues, one who desires to be free from all miseries must hear about, glorify, and remember the personality of Godhead, the Supersoul, the controller and savior from all miseries. So what is this? This is the presence of the divine within each of us, the Param Atma, the great soul, the Supersoul, who is present in all of us. God is present within all of us, every single one of us, without discrimination. Right? It's not that God is present only in the white person or the Indian person or the black person or the this or the that. No, God is not a partial person. Present in every single one of us. He's also present in everything in the creation. So everywhere is God. In everyone is God. And if we would treat them as God, there would be no conflict. We would not be at war with each other. We would not be quarreling with each other. We would not be bickering and complaining about each other. We would enjoy each other, the uniqueness of each other, the beauty of each other, that which makes each of us unique and special. Shukhadev continues, the highest perfection of human life achieved either by complete knowledge of matter and spirit, known as Gyan, or by the practice of mystic powers, Siddhi, or by perfect discharge of occupational duties, known as Karma, the ultimate perfection, the highest perfection of human life is to remember God at the end of life. So does that mean one should not care during one's life? No. Only that which you have done throughout your life is that what you'll remember at the end of life. Keep that in mind. People who have often reported that when they're dying, their whole life flashes back in front of them. Oh, so what were you doing during your life? That's the summary of all of that is going to flash back in front of you. Why is it doing that? Because that is the indicator of your consciousness, where you're at. See, that entire summary, that whole incident occurs because it shows you where you're at. And then Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, according to your consciousness, wherever your mind is fixed at the time of leaving this body, to that state you will go. So if your mind is fixed on God, you will go to God. And if your mind is fixed on the things of this world, you shall come back here. So that's why it is recommended that we practice throughout our lives remembering God, because that which we have practiced throughout our life is what we will do, and that's which will spontaneously come up at the time of leaving this body. Just think about it. If you're in a fearful situation, if a tiger walked into your room right now, or a murderer or whatever, what would you think about? Oh, my family, oh, my kids, oh, my body, oh, my possessions, oh, my this, oh, my that. What will happen to all of them? But a person who has devoted their life into spirituality, into God, who has deeply immersed themselves in that, will be fearless, and in that moment will remember God. Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam tyajati ante kalevaram tam tam evaiti kaunteya sata tad bhava bhavitaha. That wherever and whatever your mind is fixed upon at the time of leaving this body, to that state you will go. So Krishna is very clear about that. And we need to understand that that's what we need to practice. Shukhadev continues. He says, I studied this great supplement of Vedic literature. So this was the final text of the Vedas, called the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is equal to all the Vedas. I learned it from my father, Vyasadeva. I was certainly situated perfectly in transcendence, and yet I was still attracted by the delineation of the pastimes of Krishna, who is described by enlightened verses. So this Bhagavatam actually begins by this very philosophical understanding and a very broad base of giving you the concepts and the theory and the building blocks. But then it builds in a certain direction, and that direction is towards revealing to you the pastimes of Krishna and why those matter so much. Because in those pastimes we begin to have a vision of God, of what it is to be with God, what it is to live with God, what it is to sing and dance and celebrate life with God. And you begin to realize that that's my eternal home. That's where I came from. That's what I'm longing for. And here the busyness of life has kept me away from really being in a celebratory state, which I would love to be. So because I can't get there and there's not enough hours in the day and I have to work so hard for survival all day long, in the end of the day I say, let me just have a glass of wine, or let me just have something to inebriate myself, or let me just watch a show of some wonderful love story or something that's happening on the TV so that I can entertain myself. But these are ways of escaping. These are not giving us the true experience we desire. If we asked ourselves, if I did not have to bother about survival, if I was abundant and wealthy, and if I had everything, what would I do? How would I live? If I didn't have to worry about aging, or I didn't have to worry about death, and if I didn't have to worry about anything at all, and if I could be happy, how would I like to live? What would I like to do? Right? Maybe you'd say, I'd like to travel. Maybe you'll say, I'd like to create things. Maybe you'll say, I just want to be with love. Well, that's what is described in the Leela, the pastimes of Krishna. And you begin to see how, we're thinking we want that because that's where we came from. This is a memory within us to want to go back to that. But somehow we're not able to achieve it here because the world has so many demands on us. Even if you had everything going for you, the washing machine broke down, or somebody didn't show up who was supposed to show up. I'm stuck over here. And there's so many problems, right? It just doesn't happen. There's always something that's sucking your energy, sucking your times, taking away your happiness. And you're like, so frustrating. Yeah, that's where we live. So we need to be very clear. Our longings, our desires, everything, whether it's our desire for love, it's our desire for happiness, our desire to live forever, our desire to have fun and enjoy and be happy, all of that is an emanation from our spiritual nature. It is telling us about who we are and where we came from. Just a simple understanding right there. So, Shukhadev continues, this very Srimad Bhagavatam that I heard from my father, I shall now recite before you because you are the most sincere devotee of Sri Krishna. One who gives full attention and respect to hearing Srimad Bhagavatam achieves unflinching faith in the Supreme Lord, the giver of salvation. O King, by constantly chanting his name, you will have in your hands the doubtless and fearless way of success for all, including those who are free from all material desires and those who are desirous of all material enjoyment. Meaning, whether you are a person who is free from all material desires or you're a person who is desirous of all material things, either way, by chanting and remembering the names of God, by chanting, in our case, we want to chant the name of Krishna, you will have found the doubtless and fearless way of success. Then he continues, what is the value of a prolonged life which is wasted, inexperienced by years in this world? Better a moment of full consciousness, because that gives one a start in searching after his supreme interest. Parikshit, now your duration of life is limited to 7 more days. So during this time, you can perform all the rituals which are needed for the best purpose of your next life. At the last stage of one's life, one should be bold enough not to be afraid of death. But one must cut off all attachment to the material body and everything pertaining to it and all desires thereof. One should leave home and practice self-control. In a sacred place, one should bathe regularly and sit down in a lonely place duly sanctified. Now, tell me, this is the advice he's giving the king. The king has palaces, he has wealth, he has family, he's got so much. He's telling him, at the end of life, you've got to walk away from it all. I was recently at a facility which was like a hospice, and it was really sad to see people in their last stages of life, lost, bewildered, confused, agitated, some of them angry, some of them missing their loved ones, some of them feeling alone and abandoned. And all of this because they have not practiced connecting with their spirit. Even now, even as a younger person, maybe not on your final days, but as a younger person today, if you were to be alone, it's not easy. You might be happy for a little while, but after some time you start wishing you were with somebody. You had a partner, you had your children, you had some family, you had somebody around you. It's very uncomfortable for a lot of human beings to be alone. And it's something we all need to practice. The practice of being alone teaches us and prepares us for being able to come to that stage when we finally die. Because when we came to this world, we came alone, and when we leave, we also leave alone. So practicing aloneness is a very important part of life. Practicing becoming free of desire is a very big part of life. So learning how to control the senses, to control your desire for food. Let's say you wake up every morning and you want to just eat something. No. Control yourself. Practice in every way possible how to control your mind and your senses. Your senses want something sweet. They want something rich with this food or that. No, maybe you can have it later, but postpone that time. Learn to say no to your mind. Learn to say no to your senses. Learn to say no to your desires. And then, if you want to meet those desires, then learn how to do it in an appropriate way. Maybe a smaller amount, maybe in some way restrained, maybe in some way. Well, I'm not saying don't enjoy, there is plenty to enjoy, but learn to have a mechanism within you which allows you to pull the reins. Like when you're riding a horse, you need to pull the reins. When you're driving a car, you need to have a braking system. When you are with a dog, you need to have a leash. So in much the same way, we must learn how to tame our desires as we tame our mind, as we tame our senses. And that is very important, because otherwise they're controlling you. Sometimes I see a person walking with a really big dog, and it looks like the dog is taking the human being for a walk. Not that the human is taking the dog for a walk. And much the same way it is with our mind and our senses and our desires. They're taking us for a ride. They're putting us on the treadmill of life, and they're making us work for them. But is that how you want to live your life? Letting your mind, your senses, your desires dictate what they randomly want to have and not have, and then follow that, and for the rest of your life just be a humble servant of your mind and its made-up fantasies and desires? Or would you rather have it in control and then be able to focus on that which you are? Focus on the real thing. Because in the real thing, you find the real satisfaction, right? Whereas in the false thing, you never get any real satisfaction any more than if you played a virtual reality game and had a relationship in a virtual reality and you lived in a virtual reality home. Well, it might be fun, but it would not satisfy you. Eventually you got to come back to your real home, which maybe is a dump, which maybe is a mess, which you got dirty dishes lying in the sink, and you got all your clothes all over, and you haven't brushed your teeth, and you haven't had a shower, because you've been living in that virtual world. So this world we live in, this is the virtual world. And the real world is invisible to us. It's that world that lies within us. It is that world of God that is beckoning to us. It is there. Every religion talks about it, but they don't talk about the path to get there. They simply say, oh, magic wand, say this thing, do this thing, and you'll be transported back. No, there's a process, my dear. And that process is what the Bhagavatam is talking about. So it talks about beginning with the chanting of Om. And I'm going to have you do this with me. We've done it. Some of you have done it with me before, but it begins with the 3 letters. So 3 letters are A, U, M. A-U-M. A, U, M. Right? Now, most people call this Om, and it's all right to call it Om for more conversational purposes. But the real chanting of Om is Aum. It begins from your belly. Then it moves up to your chest. Ooh. You close your mouth and you reverberate the sound ma inside your head. So you close your mouth and it's reverberating inside you, like a humming. And you'll feel it filling your entire head. Now, in the beginning, you keep your awareness on your belly button. Then you bring your conscious awareness to your heart. Ooh. And then you bring your awareness to your third eye. So this is the way the chanting of Om is done. And regulating of the breath in the process. So you take a deep breath. Do it with me. And then pause. Feel the stillness. Then take a deep breath again. then pause, and then begin again. Pause again. Like this, you continue. So Parikshit is talking about meditation begins with the chanting of Om, regulating the breath, controlling the sitting posture, so making your spine straight, keeping your shoulders back, and controlling the mind like I was telling you earlier. Then he talks about meditating on the form of Vishnu. Vishnu is known as the ultimate truth, and I will show you a picture to show you what he's talking about. Let's see if we can go there. I'll show that to you later, I guess. I have it set up somewhere else. There we go. Yeah. So meditating on the form of Vishnu, like that. I'll tell you more about it in just a minute. And by doing this, the mind will, so if you're a more visual person, then you can use a visual representation of the divine that will help you meditate. And I'll explain that in just a minute. He says, by doing this, the mind will be cleansed from agitation and bewilderment. And that's something we all suffer from. The mind is agitated constantly. All kinds of things agitate the mind, from our cell phones to the people in our lives, to the situations that are going on at our work or even in our body. There's all kinds of agitations, and there's all kinds of bewilderment. It says the entire material manifestation. Now he's giving you a way to meditate here. You start with the external world. You can use the external world as a way to meditate. He says the entire material manifestation is the gigantic body of God, within which past, present, and future are experienced. The planetary systems or galaxies are his bodily parts. The feet, the hips, the head, etc. The trees are his hairs, the rivers are his veins, and the air is his breath. One who desires seriously to become liberated concentrates his mind on this form of God, because there is nothing more than this in the material world. One must concentrate the mind on him, the only all-blissful absolute truth. Otherwise one will be misled and will cause his own degradation. Now, a vital point I want to take up here, and that is, why is God referred to as him and not her? Let's be clear about this. God is actually neither masculine nor feminine. Many of the pictures that you will see show God as being both masculine and feminine in one. So they will appear to have a feminine quality while still in a masculine form. And you're like, what's going on out here? Why is it looking so feminine? It's kind of weird. But that's because God actually does not have a form. We use he in general. Now, if you wanted to go into a form, then that form is both masculine and feminine. So there is Krishna, who is the masculine part, and Radha, who is the feminine part of the same divine, 100% the same. Okay? Some will say Krishna is greater than Radha, some will say Radha is greater than Krishna. That's a question of one's devotion. That's also a question of the depth of one's understanding. I would say to you that Radha is greater than Krishna because I am a great lover of Radha. And I see how Krishna is devoted to her and how he is completely besotted by her. You know, it's like you're seeing your own counterpart in the opposite sex, and you're completely fascinated. But then that opposite is not opposite, because, see, there's a verse where it says, Radha kept on thinking of Krishna, and the more she thought of him, she became like Krishna, and she began to look completely like him. And there's a time where Krishna comes into this world as Chaitanya, and in Chaitanya he is both Radha and Krishna combined, masculine and feminine combined. So don't get caught up on these gender things, because these are things of the world. What is important is the masculine and feminine energies, and the energies of masculinity can be in a woman, and the energies of femininity can be within a man. It has nothing to do with one's physical body. It has everything to do with one's energy. And that energy can be either way. These are tools we have. These are aspects of ourself that we have. We have them because God has them. All right? So let this not become some gender issue. We're going to use the general word he. And I hope you can accept that. Thank you. We now begin with Canto 1. I'm sorry. We're going on to chapter 2 now. It's chapter 1, we're on chapter 2. So Shukhadev continues here. He says, the way of presentation of the Vedic sounds is so bewildering that it directs the intelligence of the people to meaningless things like heavenly kingdoms. The conditioned souls hover in dreams of heavenly pleasures, but actually they do not relish any tangible happiness in such places. So he's saying one of the dangers for a person who is a spiritual aspirant is they somehow think that if I do all this spiritual stuff, I'm going to have a great life. You know, you've heard of the law of attraction, right? A lot of people wanted to use spirituality as a way to fulfill all their material desires. And to all of them, I would say, why? What is it you're trying to attract, and what is it that you're trying to achieve? Have you ever looked deeper? I'm not saying you shouldn't have wealth. Have the wealth you want, but that is not what spirituality is about. And trying to use spirituality for that purpose means you haven't quite understood. One must be clear about the goal of life. There is a goal, okay, which is love of God, and then there is a path to get there. Now, on that path, you can be comfortable. On that path, you can have material things. You can be a king or a queen. You can have all the stuff of the world. But the key is, do not be attached to any of it, because none of it is yours. You will leave it all behind. So be very clear about these things. And then keep your mind fixed on the goal. Don't get caught up in the stuff, because this stuff will betray you in the end. I saw, is it Howard Hughes? No, I don't forget. One of these big millionaires, there was this movie where they were showing the end of his life. And he had collected all this art and all these things because he didn't trust people. So he had all this incredible he trusted art. He trusted, these are things that will last forever. And then he's on his last days and he's dying and he's looking at his art and he's looking at his sculptures and he's looking at all these collections from Rodin and from Picasso and from this and from that. They feeling a sense of eternity within these things, but those things were not able to help him at the time of dying. It was heartbreaking to see this man reaching out, help me, calling out to those works of art because he'd invested all his time and money and energy in that. And it could not help him. Nothing can. Not our loved ones, not our children, not our wealth, not our body, nothing. And that's why this is so important. Not because we're trying to be all negative and stuff, as some people might say, but because this is the reality and it's better to be prepared. Just as we get ourselves a life insurance or we get ourselves a health insurance, be prepared. And it's the same thing. This is getting yourself a spiritual insurance, right? Getting an insurance plan to prepare ourselves for the inevitable. So then Shukhadev continues, for this reason, the enlightened person should endeavor only for the minimum necessities of life while in the world of names. He should be intelligently fixed and never endeavor for unwanted things, being competent to perceive practically that all such endeavors are merely hard labor for nothing. Now, Parikshit is going to present to you a very detached, saintly way. This is not necessarily the way of the householder or the family person, but I still want you to hear it because this is an ideal. It may not be where you're at right now. It may not be where I'm at right now. But it is an ideal, and it's good to have an ideal in your mind. One thing we can take away from here is we can live a simple life, a minimalistic life, a life that is focused on the necessities and not trying to overindulge in things that are not going to really be there in the long term. Shukhadev continues. When there are ample earthly flats, there's land to lie on, what is the necessity of beds and mattresses? When one can use his own arms, what is the necessity of a pillow? When one can use the palms of his hands, what is the necessity of varieties of utensils? When there is ample covering, or the skin of trees, what is the necessity of clothing? Are there no torn clothes lying on the common road? Do the trees which exist for maintaining others no longer give alms in charity? Do the rivers being dried up no longer supply water to the thirsty? Are the caves of the mountains now closed? Or above all, does the Almighty Lord not protect the fully surrendered souls? Why then do the learned sages, and he's talking about there's so many learned sages and priests and so on, why do they go to flatter those who are intoxicated by hard-earned wealth? One must render service unto the Paramatma, the super soul, the great soul situated in one's own heart by his omnipotency, because that super soul, that Paramatma, is the almighty personality of Godhead, eternal and unlimited. He is the unlimited goal of life, ultimate goal of life. And by worshipping him, one can end the cause of the conditioned state of existence. So, as I showed you earlier, this was a picture of the yogi meditating on God within the heart, the Paramatma, in the form of Vishnu. Vishnu has 4 hands like that. And Parikshit then continues, who else but the gross materialist will neglect such a transcendental thought and take to the non-permanent names or the world of names, seeing the mass of people fallen in the river of suffering as a consequence of accruing the result of their own work? So in other words, why do we suffer? We suffer because of our karma. We suffer because we have neglected to take care of our soul. We're not feeding our soul with the nutrition it needs. We're feeding our body. So many people are so fixed on trying to take care of their body. They're so fixed on trying to take care of, at best, their mind. But they're not taking care of feeding the soul. So you feed the soul by giving it what nourishes it. You cannot give, let's say, a horse the food that you might give to a dog. You cannot give a dog the food you might give to a horse. You cannot give a human the food that you give to some other creature. Every creature, everything has its own food. Our ears cannot eat. They need sound. Our nostrils cannot hear. They need smell. And similarly, the soul needs certain kinds of food. And that food comes by something that is of its vibration. The soul is only nurtured by that which is of its vibration. What is of the soul's vibration? Not the stuff of the world. No, that will not satisfy. But if you can be with the stuff of the world and be mindful and be very present and feel the energy within it, now there you're starting your journey. And if you can go within yourself and experience the deeper part of what lies within you through meditation or any such process, then you have begun to feed your soul. But furthermore is the process by hearing and chanting about God, hearing about his names, his pastimes, Leela, and now he's giving a process where you can meditate upon the Paramatma, the super soul within. So he says, the Lord of the heart, this is how you meditate on him, measuring 8 inches. So now you create a little visual. I'd like you to close your eyes for a moment and just really go into this. And I showed you some picture of Vishnu earlier. I'll give you another one so that you can begin this process of meditation. So just take a look at your screen right now and you'll see there a picture of Vishnu. Now take that picture into your mind and follow along with me. Just close your eyes. Feel this presence within your heart. The Lord of the heart, measuring 8 inches, with 4 hands, carrying a lotus, a conch shell, a disc, and a club. His mouth expresses his happiness, his eyes spread like the petals of a lotus, and his garments bedecked with valuable jewels are yellowish like the saffron of a kadamba flower. His golden ornaments are set with jewels, and he wears a glowing headdress and earrings. His lotus feet are placed on the whorls of a lotus, which represents the hearts of great mystics. On his chest is the Kaustubha jewel, engraved with a beautiful calf, and there are other jewels on his clothes. His complete torso is garlanded with fresh flowers. He is well decorated with an ornamental wreath around his waist, and rings studded with valuable jewels on his fingers. His anklets, his bangles, his curly long hair with a bluish tint, and his beautiful smiling face are all very pleasing. His magnanimous pastimes and the glowing glance of his smiling face are all indications of his extensive benedictions. One must therefore concentrate on this transcendental form of God as long as the mind can be fixed on him by meditation. The process of meditation should begin from his lotus feet, then the calves, then the thighs, and in this way progress to his smiling face. The more the mind becomes fixed upon the different parts of his body, the more the intelligence becomes purified. Whenever the yogi desires to leave this planet of human beings, he should not be concerned about the proper time or place, but should comfortably sit without being disturbed, and regulating the life air should control the senses by the mind. The yogi should merge his mind by his unalloyed intelligence into the living entity, and then merge the living entity into the super self. And by doing this, the fully satisfied living entity becomes situated in the supreme stage of satisfaction, so that he ceases from all other activities. You can open your eyes now. One thing you'll notice, if you were actually meditating and if you were following along with me, you will notice that there is a peace within you. You will notice that time stops. You will notice a sense of otherworldliness. That is the experience of hearing about these things. And if you actually go into meditating like this, you will find yourself going deeper and deeper into a state which frees you from this world, frees you from your mind, frees you from your desires instantly. So this visual or this visualization is something you can go back to even in the recordings, and you can use it to be able to meditate upon God. If you prefer a more visual representation, of course the auditory representation of Om is always there, but a lot of people are very visual, and for them a visual representation is very helpful. That is why God has a form. It doesn't have to have a form, but chooses to have a form because it makes things more exciting and juicy and spicy and fun. So, Shukhadev continues, one who is in absolute harmony with God does not create perplexities, but worships the lotus feet of God at every moment, taking them into his heart. And then it talks about how the yogi moves the life energy from the Muladhara, the root chakra, to the Sahasra, the crown chakra. I'm going to show you a picture here to give you a little idea of the yogic conception of this. Now, you've all heard about the chakras, or at least many of you have. There are different names in English. For example, the Muladhara, which is the root chakra. Then the Swadhisthana, which is the sacral chakra. So the Muladhara, the root chakra, deals with basically your survival in the world. So it's learning to trust. It's learning to feel safe in the world. The Swadhisthana or the sacral chakra deals with your sexuality, your creativity. Interesting that the two go together. Our sexuality and our creativity go in the same place. They come from the same energy center within the body. The chakras are an energy system within the body. Then you have the Manipura. I'm going from down to up. The Manipura is the solar plexus chakra, and this is the seat of your emotions. It is also the place of power and wisdom. Above that is the Anahat, or the heart chakra. And this is the place where, as you open that heart chakra, you begin to feel a more expansive love for everything and everyone. Then there is the Agya, the throat chakra. And this is the place from communication. Very often when we feel blocked in here, it's hard for us to express what we're thinking, what we're feeling to other people. Then there is the Vishuddha, or the third eye chakra as it's called. And this is the place of awareness, the third eye. This is the place that lights up when we are truly conscious beings and we're able to see through the shall we say, the BS of the world or the ignorance of the world. We're able to see through and see through reality the things that most people do not see. And then there ultimately is the Sahasra, or the crown chakra, and this is the seat of spirituality. So the yogi then moves the energy at the time of death from the root chakra, from the Muladhara, all the way up, all the different chakras, all the way up to the Sahasra and the crown chakra, and then leaves his body or her body at will. As you saw in the case of Bhishma. Bhishma did exactly that. He was able to leave his body at will. We then have another kind of system that is there, which is known as the koshas. There are three different kinds of bodies that the Vedas talk about. They are referred to as the koshas, the 5 koshas, and the 3 bodies. Let me show you a chart of that as well. There is the physical body, which is called Annamaya kosha. And that is the physical covering, the physical body, which is developed through the eating of food. And it grows with food and water. And it's developed through all the stuff that we put into it. Then there is the subtle body, which consists of 3 parts. The mental, Manomaya kosha, that is the mental body. Then Pranamaya kosha, which is the life force energy within us. And then there is the Vijnanamaya, the wisdom body. Right? So these 3 together, the mental sheath, the life force sheath, and the wisdom sheath, these are different coverings. They form the subtle body. And I'm going to talk to you about the subtle body in a bit. And finally, there is the Anandamaya kosha, which is the causal body. So the physical body, the subtle body, and the causal body. Annamaya kosha, Manamaya kosha, Pranamaya kosha, Vijnanamaya kosha, and Anandamaya kosha. You see, the yogis did a great study in this whole thing. They really researched and really broke it all down so we could begin to see the different systems that are working within us. They weren't dull and dumb and stupid savages. They were highly evolved people. And they had developed an incredible science, which we are now learning out here. But they had really developed it and lived it. Anyway, so it talks about as you begin to move the energy upward at the time of death, one begins to leave this world. Now, here comes a very critical part. If you still have material desires, then you will go to one of the billions of planets in the universe. The soul will then be accompanied by the subtle body. So the subtle body accompanies the soul. Remember, the subtle body consists of the man, that is the mind, the intelligence, and the life force, prana. These go with the subtle body. And they go, the subtle body accompanies, these are the subtle body, and that subtle body accompanies the soul. That is why you remember things from past lives. If you're put into hypnosis, you're able to remember because your subtle body came with you. The physical body did not. The physical body of different lifetimes was left behind. But the subtle body goes with you life after life. Now he says, if you have desires, you will go to one of the billions of planets in the universe. But if you are free from material desires, if you've truly freed yourself, then, and from karma, you will begin the journey back to the spiritual world. He talks about a place called Maharloka, where the duration of life is 4.3 trillion years. Then Satyaloka, where the duration of life is 311,040 trillion years. And here, in this Satyaloka, there is neither bereavement, nor old age, nor death. There is no pain of any kind, and therefore no anxieties, save that sometimes there is a feeling of compassion for those who are subjected to the unsurpassable miseries in the material world. Now, one doesn't have to go through all of this, but this is the typical path of the yogi. If one is in the path of devotion, the path is a little bit of a shortcut there. But anyway, we're talking the path of the yogi first. Gradually one goes beyond the body, mind, and ego, as well as the influence of the modes of nature, goodness, passion, and ignorance, and comes to the state of self-realization. Then, when one is free from material conception, one travels in one's spiritual body to be with God in complete bliss and satisfaction. So that process, of course, can also be achieved through bhakti or devotion, by chanting the names of God, by remembering God, by meditating on the deity of God, by finding the presence of God in everything and everyone all around you, by becoming immersed in the Leela and the pastimes of Krishna. Then one goes directly back to him, as he says in the Bhagavad Gita. And the final part now, he says, for those who are wandering in the material universe, there is no more auspicious means of deliverance than what is aimed at in the direct devotion to Sri Krishna. The great personality Brahma, with great attention and concentration of mind, studied the Vedas 3 times, and after scrutinizingly examining them, he ascertained that attraction for Krishna is the highest perfection of all religion. Shri Krishna is in every living being, along with the individual soul, and this fact is perceived and hypothesized in our acts of seeing and taking help from the intelligence. It is therefore essential that every human being hear about, glorify, and remember him always and everywhere. Those who drink through oral reception, fully filled with the nectarian message of Sri Krishna, the beloved of the devotees, they will purify the desire for material enjoyment and thus go back to him, to his lotus feet. So with that, we end the 2nd chapter of the Bhagavatam. And I'd like to throw this open for questions. If you've got questions, I'd love for you to write them down, or if you'd like to actually get on here, I'd love to have you join me and ask your questions. It'd be wonderful to have you here. Please write down any questions you might have. I'd take them up so that we can answer them. Does anyone have some thoughts? Cindy Crawford here. She's got a lovely message here. She says, thank you, Rohit. Good session to better understand how meditation takes us through the dimensions of space-time within. Yes, it really is trying to show us through all of this that how we go through the space-time continuum within ourselves. This is a journey that we've come here to take, and I want to recommend to each of you, become a master. Don't just be here living at the effect of the world. Be at cause. Be a person who is taken back control over your mind and over the journey of life. We're not victims. We're not here to suffer. We're not here to be tossed around by the mercies of, by the vagaries of whatever other human beings do. Not at all. Our happiness needs to be in our hands, and not at the mercy of others. I don't deny that for a moment we all get upset, or we all get hurt, or we all get sad. That's part of being human. But learn to pull back your energy from whoever and whatever you've given it to. Remember that your energy is something that you need to guard very carefully. If you give your energy to others and you leave yourself at their mercy, in other words, whether it is whether you are a good human being or not, whether you are worthy or not, whether you are, whatever it is, if you leave your sense of self in the hands of others, you're going to be in a mess. If you're going to leave your happiness in the hands of others, well, you're going to be a mess. If you're going to leave your happiness or your peace of mind in the hands of the government or the weather or the news or anything else, or your job or your business, well, then you're going to be a mess. Because all of that is up and down, sometimes good, sometimes bad, sometimes the way you want it to be and sometimes not the way you want it to be. So don't do that. Pull your energy and your power back. I determine my happiness. I determine my well-being. I determine my peace of mind. If something is taking it away from me, I have the ability to turn my mind around. The only way somebody can make you unhappy is if you are wanting them to do things differently than they're doing. If you are expecting them to be other than who they are, then you will find yourself unhappy. But if you expect people to be exactly as they are, nobody can make you unhappy. If you expect people to do exactly what they do, no one will disappoint you. If you want to know the secret of how to get out of expectations and being hurt, it is only this. Expect people to be as they are, not as you are. Expect people to do what they do, not what you would do. And then you'll find yourself free to be happy. Expect the world to be as it is, Notice the nature of how it is and how people are and what is going on. Notice it, observe it. Don't close your eyes. Don't be like that rabbit that closes his eyes and pretends like everything's okay, or the ostrich that buries its head under the sand and thinks, oh, just hope everything becomes okay. There are predictions. Our world might be getting into a big mess in times to come, but be prepared. Be prepared to keep your energy with you, not with others. And then you'll find yourself living a happier life. Nobody should be given your happiness, the control over your happiness, shall I say. So, any more questions? Any observations, any thoughts, introspections? If nothing else, take this away today. I am in charge of my happiness, my peace, and my life. And I'm going to prepare myself for the inevitable by focusing in on my spirituality, by devoting myself to my self-realization and to God. And by doing that, I commit myself to the highest purpose of all. Thank you so much for being here. I look forward to seeing you next week. Jai Shri Krishna. Hare Krishna. Jai Shri Radhe. Shalom.
Thanks, Rut.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Love your presence. Thank you.